Reiner de Ridder versus Robert Whittaker is rumored to be in the works, and I would say that this matchup might potentially be taking place in the late summer or early fall. Obviously, Robert Whittaker might still need a little bit of time to let his injury recover from the Khamzat Chimaev fight before jumping into a training camp. But I think both of their schedules line up, and Reinier de Ridder is looking to be active, and it looks like he took almost no damage against Bo Nickel, and he's looking to get a huge step up in competition. In the post-fight interview after he fought Bo Nickel, he called out Sean Strickland. However, like I said, it's rumored that the UFC, they're trying to match him up against Robert Whittaker. I think that Robert Whittaker is the perfect opponent to see if Reiner can hang with the elite of the middleweight division. I like how polarizing this matchup is. On one hand, you have Robert Whittaker, who is a former champion, a UFC veteran. He has been a staple in the middleweight division for about a decade. And then you have Reiner de Ridder, who only made his UFC debut about 6 months ago. So in today's video, we will be analyzing this matchup, and I'll be showing you guys who I think will win this matchup as well. So let's start by diving into each fighter's attributes, starting with Reiner de Ridder. So Reiner de Ridder, he is 20-2 in his MMA career. He is a absolute huge middleweight. He's 6'4" with a 78-inch reach. And during his fights, he probably weighs upwards of 210 pounds when he's in the octagon. And like I said, this is absolutely huge for the middleweight division. He has a huge frame, and he has a grappling heavy style. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he is also a submission artist. He has a lot of wins by submission. And lately, he has been working on his striking. A lot of times when you have these jiu-jitsu guys coming to MMA, their striking can be a little bit awkward because they're not coming from a striking background. Like, they're not coming from boxing or kickboxing or anything like that. So their striking is a little bit awkward, and you can definitely see that reflected in Reiner de Ridder's style. But Reiner, he does have power in his hands. He has KO power. He has a few knockout victories, and he almost knocked out fighters like Gerald Meerschaert. He dropped him with a huge looping overhand, and Reiner de Ridder is a very powerful middleweight. And as for his strengths, I would say his size is his biggest strength. He also has very good work in the clinch. He has good ground control along with submissions. As for Reiner de Ridder's weaknesses, I would say his striking level. Like I said, he isn't coming from a striking background, so his striking isn't elite. He doesn't have that elite understanding of how to strike. And another weakness I would say is his competition prior to coming to the UFC. A lot of his wins, they've came in 1FC. 1FC in the higher weight classes. The competition is really weak. 1FC in the lower weight classes, their lower weight class fighters are pretty elite, but when you get into the light heavyweight and middleweight weight classes, 1FC, they can be lacking in that aspect of their promotion. Now, when we analyze Robert Whittaker, he's 26-8, and Robert Whittaker, he's also big for the middleweight division. When he came up in the UFC until he was champ, he was kind of like on the smaller side. But later on in his career, I think he packed on some solid muscle to compete with these bigger and more physical middleweights. He has a lot of notable wins in the middleweight division. As like I said, he's been a staple for nearly a decade. He beat fighters like Yoel Romero, Jared Cannonier, and Marvin Vettori. Robert Whittaker, he has elite striking, he has elite wrestling defense, and he has elite movement and footwork. So as for his strengths, I would say that would be his fight IQ, his wrestling defense, and his takedown defense. Robert Whittaker, he knows how to scramble. He's a very good wrestler, and that is going to be a problem for Reiner de Ridder. We're going to talk more about that later when we analyze the actual clash of styles that will be happening in this matchup. But as for Robert Whittaker's weaknesses, this might be a little bit more recent, but I'll say his injuries. He can get injured a lot in his fights. I believe when he fought Yoel Romero, I think he broke his forearm in that fight. He still ended up winning, but in his most recent fight when he fought Khamzat Chimaev, he broke his teeth in his jaw when Khamzat Chimaev had him in a face crank. So yeah, I would say injuries are probably a big weakness for Robert Whittaker. And I would say another weakness would be grappling vulnerabilities against high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Robert Whittaker, he is a very good wrestler. However, he isn't that good in the pure jiu-jitsu front. He can hang with people on the ground, but when you're attempting these weird submissions, sometimes it's better for him to not hang in those spots too long. He can take people down, but like I said, he just sometimes like gets up when people are attempting these high level submissions and are trying to like transition to different positions while grappling with him. Now, moving on to the actual fight between these two fighters, I think that this is going to be a huge stylistic clash. And to get out of the way, I just want to say that Robert Whittaker, he is obviously the superior striker in this matchup, mainly because of the speed discrepancy. Reiner de Ridder, his striking can be really slow. Like I said, he's a huge middleweight. He's very muscular. And I think that plays a part into why he can sometimes look really slow. His strikes can be kind of labored at some points. And I think that Robert Whittaker, he can take advantage of this. Robert Whittaker uses his signature karate blitz to close the distance and land that jab cross. And in my opinion, that jab is going to be a problem for Reinier de Ridder. Reinier de Ridder, he doesn't really move his head that well. And he chooses to use this really high guard. I think a lot of Robert Whittaker's punches will break through the guard of Reinier de Ridder. Another fighter that uses that high guard is Dricus du Plessis, the current middleweight champion. But the difference between Dricus and Reiner de Ridder is that Dricus is way more consistent with using that high guard. Dricus uses it almost religiously, and you can see him put up the high guard after almost every striking exchange. However, there are many instances where Reiner de Ridder can be seen walking in the range without having his guard up. When he fought Bo Nickel in his most recent fight, right before that knee that ends the entire fight, he walks in the range with his guard slightly down, and Bo Nickel plants a clean overhand on Reiner's chin. Reiner de Ridder, he just tanks through the overhand and he lands that beautiful knee that finishes the fight. Though Reiner de Ridder, he won that fight and won that entire exchange, you don't want to be walking in the range without his guard up against Robert Whittaker, because Robert Whittaker is way more of an elusive striker. He knows how to dart in and out of range without getting hit, especially against slower fighters like Reiner de Ridder. He displayed that when he fought Marvin Vettori and many other middleweights. That's why I think it's crucial for Robert Whittaker to try and keep the fight at range. However, the problem with that blitz of Robert Whittaker is that sometimes it causes Robert Whittaker to just collide with his opponents. And since this happens so often, I think that Robert Whittaker will initiate the clinch multiple times in this fight by crashing into Reiner de Ridder. And because of this, I think the clinch is going to play a huge role in this matchup. Reiner de Ridder is great in the clinch. He stays really busy and he uses his size to just lean his weight on you to sap the energy of his opponents. Reiner, he's tall with longer legs than Whittaker, so Reiner can drill those knees up the middle and they're going to land right on the liver and just punish that gas tank of Robert Whittaker. Obviously, we've seen this with Bo Nickel, and Robert Whittaker is about an inch shorter than Bo, so it might be easier for those knees to land to the midsection. However, Robert Whittaker, he has a way stronger core and just a more durable body and frame than Bo Nickel. So those knees in the clinch, they will hurt, but I don't think he's the type to get finished from body shots. So that is going to be a really crucial aspect in this fight. How is Robert Whittaker going to use that blitz without engaging in the clinch? Because I believe that once he gets in that clinch, there's going to be some problems. And as I was thinking about the clinch battle, it got me questioning another aspect of this fight. And that question was, how does Reiner de Ridder's grappling match up against Robert Whittaker's takedown defense? We all know that Reiner de Ridder's jiu-jitsu is absolutely elite. And in my opinion, he's probably going to submit Robert Whittaker if they spend a lot of time on the ground. But the problem is, how is Reiner de Ridder going to get Robert Whittaker to the ground in the first place? And to put it simply, I don't think that Reiner de Ridder can take down Robert Whittaker using the traditional single and double leg takedown attempts. Reiner de Ridder's wrestling is mediocre, and Robert Whittaker has brick wall takedown defense, and he can initiate scrambles to not get held down on the ground. And yes, Robert Whittaker, he did get mauled by the wrestling of Khamzat Chimaev, but Khamzat is legit the best wrestler in the UFC. and he was like actually shooting takedowns at Whitaker's ankles. Reiner's wrestling ability is not even comparable to Khamzat Chimaev. Honestly, I think it's more likely that Robert Whittaker will take down Reinier de Ridder by faking that karate blitz in the range and timing the double leg by beating Reiner to his hips. Whittaker did this and completed the takedown when he fought Dricus du Plessis. Reiner is taller than Dricus, and he uses that same high guard, so his hips are going to be open in some moments. But anyways, I think the best way for Reiner de Ridder to take down Robert Whittaker is going to be in the clinch. That's why I mentioned before, the clinch is going to be almost essential if Reiner wants to win this fight. Since Reiner's wrestling is not elite, he'll have to initiate trips and throws in the clinch. He needs to just muscle Whittaker to the ground, kind of like how Dricus did when he fought Robert Whittaker in his fight. And I keep mentioning Dricus du Plessis, but Dricus and Reiner de Ridder, they have that similar fighting style. And I think that Whittaker, when he fought Dricus du Plessis in that fight, I think that is a perfect reference point to work from when you're trying to analyze the matchup between Whittaker and Reiner de Ridder. So for the keys to victory for each fighter, I think that Reiner de Ridder, he needs to close the distance. He needs to avoid the striking exchanges. Like I said, Whittaker, he is the better striker. He's the more elusive striker. And he's just going to be able to just dart in and out of range if Reiner de Ridder does not try and close the distance at all. And Robert Whittaker, he has the ability to piece up Reiner de Ridder 4 or 5 rounds. I don't know if this would be a 5-round main event or if this will be like a 3-rounder for a pay-per-view. But if this is a 5-rounder, it definitely favors Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker, he's going to have the better cardio, and he's going to be able to push that pace in the later rounds. So for the keys to victory for Robert Whittaker, he's going to need to maintain range, use his footwork, and punish those takedown attempts. Because even though Reiner de Ridder, like I said, his wrestling is not elite, it's very mediocre, I still think that he's going to attempt to take down Robert Whittaker using those single and double legs. He just won't be able to get them because of Robert Whittaker's brick wall takedown defense. So Robert Whittaker needs to punish those incomplete takedown attempts and use his cardio in the later rounds. As for a prediction on who wins this fight, I'm going to have to lean towards Reiner de Ridder. This will be a very close fight. I just think that Reiner de Ridder, he has that physicality advantage. And Robert Whittaker, he does struggle against fighters who are going to be very physical, who are going to be constantly putting him on the back foot. But like I said, this fight is close. Whittaker, he can for sure use that championship experience, that elite UFC experience to win this fight in the later rounds. I just think that, like I said, there's going to be a lot of clinching in this fight. That blitz is going to initiate the clinch so many times. That's going to be the opportunity for Reiner de Ridder to work what he's best at. And he's so good in the clinch. I just think that that's really going to be the deciding factor in this fight. In regards to how the fight ends, Robert Whittaker, in my opinion, he's more likely to win this fight by a knockout. And obviously, Reiner de Ridder is more likely to win this fight by a submission. As for a hypothetical prediction for this fight, I think that Reiner de Ridder, he can probably win this fight by a submission. Obviously, I'm not that confident in this pick. I still want to watch a little bit more tape on each of the fighters. And also, if this fight goes to decision, I'm obviously favoring Robert Whittaker. So it's kind of this weird way of looking at the fight. I think that Reiner de Ridder, he's more likely to win by submission, but Robert Whittaker, he has way more tools in his arsenal to win this fight. So like I said, as an early prediction, I favor Reiner de Ridder to win this matchup. Reiner, he's running through all of his opponents in the middleweight division, and I think he's going to be more hungry than Robert Whittaker.